Marcus Chen stood outside the Plaza Hotel at exactly 11:47 p.m. watching the richest man in America step out of a limousine. Everyone knew Richard Ashford, the tech billionaire who'd turned a college dorm room idea into a $47 billion empire, the man whose face was on magazine covers, whose opinions moved stock markets, whose philanthropy fed millions. But tonight, Richard Ashford looked like he wanted to disappear. Marcus had been homeless for 127 days. He knew because he'd been counting, marking each one on a folded piece of cardboard he kept in his coat pocket. Tonight was cold enough that his breath came out in clouds, and his fingers had gone numb 2 hours ago. He'd positioned himself near the hotel entrance because the doorman usually ignored him here, and sometimes guests dropped spare change without making eye contact. Richard walked past him without looking. That was normal. Marcus was invisible to people like that. To everyone, really. Just another homeless man in a city full of them. Then Richard stopped. He turned around slowly, his expensive shoes making no sound on the sidewalk. He walked back and stood directly in front of Marcus. Not beside him, not near him. Directly in front of him, close enough that Marcus could smell his cologne. Something expensive and sharp. "What's your name?" Richard asked. Marcus looked up, startled. In 4 months on the streets, exactly 3 people had asked his name. Marcus Chen, sir. Marcus. Richard said it carefully, like he was testing how it felt. "Can I buy you dinner?" Marcus blinked. "Sir?" "I said, can I buy you dinner? There's a diner 2 blocks from here. It's late, but they're open. I'm hungry and I hate eating alone." Richard's voice was steady, but there was something in his eyes that Marcus couldn't. Quite red, something desperate. "I don't have money to pay you back," Marcus said quietly. "I'm not asking you to pay me back. I'm asking you to have dinner with me." Marcus nodded slowly. What else could he do? They walked 2 blocks in silence. The diner was nearly empty. Just a tired waitress wiping down tables and a cook visible through the kitchen window. Richard chose a booth in the back, away from the windows. He didn't sit across from Marcus. He sat on the same side of the booth, shoulder to shoulder, like they were old friends. "Order anything you want," Richard said, handing Marcus a menu. Marcus's hands were shaking, not from the cold anymore, but from something else. When was the last time someone had handed him something without expecting anything back? He couldn't remember. He ordered eggs, toast, and coffee. Simple, safe. Richard ordered the same. "How long have you been on the streets?" Richard asked when the waitress left. 4 months. 1 week, 2 days. Richard nodded slowly. "You're counting?" "Yeah. Why?" Marcus looked at him, really looked at him. Under the expensive suit and the perfect haircut, Richard Ashford looked exhausted, more than exhausted, hollowed out, because if I stop counting, I'll forget I'm still here, that I still exist. Something shifted in Richard's expression. He turned away, staring at the table. "Yeah," he said softly. "Yeah, I understand that." The food came. Marcus ate slowly, trying not to seem desperate even though he was. Trying to maintain some dignity. Richard barely touched his eggs. He just sat there, staring at his coffee cup like it held answers to questions he hadn't asked yet. "Can I tell you something?" Richard said suddenly. "Something I've never told anyone?" Marcus set down his fork. "Sure. 3 weeks ago, I was standing on my balcony. I live on the 47th floor of a building in Tribeca. Floor-to-ceiling windows. View of the entire city." Richard's voice was flat, emotionless. "I was standing there at 2 in the morning, and I was thinking about how easy it would be to open that window and step through it." Marcus stopped breathing. "I have $47 billion. Richard continued. "I have houses in 7 countries. I have a company that employs 89,000 people. I have everything anyone could ever want." He finally looked at Marcus, "and I have never felt more alone in my entire life." Marcus didn't know what to say. "My wife left me 18 months ago. Took our daughter. Emma's 7 now. She lives in London with her mother and her mother's new husband, who Emma calls Dad because I'm never there. I missed her birthday 3 years in a row because of board. Meetings, 3 years." Richard's voice cracked. "What kind of father does that?" "A busy one," Marcus offered quietly. "A bad one," Richard corrected. "My mother died 6 months ago. I was in Tokyo for a conference when it happened. I got on a plane immediately, but she was gone before I landed. I never got to say goodbye. He picked up his coffee cup but didn't drink. The funeral was packed. 400 people showed up. Want to know how many of them actually cared about her? How many weren't just there for networking opportunities? Marcus waited. 7, I counted. 7 people who actually cried. The rest were taking phone calls during the eulogy. I'm sorry, Marcus said. Everyone's sorry, Richard said. Bitterly, everyone sends flowers and says the right words, and then they ask if I'm still doing the merger with Tanaka Corp. He set the cup down hard enough that coffee sloshed over. The side. I have 3 assistants who manage my schedule, a chef who makes my meals, a driver who takes me places, a whole team of people who run my life. And do you know something? I don't think a single one of them knows my middle name. They definitely don't know what I like to read, or that I'm terrified of thunderstorms, or that I still sleep with a nightlight because the dark reminds me of being alone. Marcus absorbed this. What's your middle name? Richard looked at him. James Richard James Ashford. That's a good name, Marcus said. My middle name is Wei. My grandmother chose it. It means great in Chinese, which I always thought was funny because I turned out pretty. Ordinary? You're eating dinner with a billionaire who just admitted he wants to die, Richard said. That's not ordinary. That's the strangest thing that's happened to me in years. You don't want to die, Marcus said gently. You want someone to see you. There's a difference. Richard went very still. Then he put his face in his hands and started to cry. Not quiet tears, deep wrenching sobs that shook his shoulders. The waitress looked over, concerned, but Marcus waved her away. Marcus put his hand on Richard's shoulder and just sat there, letting him break apart in a diner at midnight, not trying to fix it, not offering empty words, just being there. When Richard finally stopped, his eyes were red and his face was blotchy. I'm sorry, he said, wiping his face with his napkin. God, I'm sorry, you don't need this. Everyone needs someone to see them break, Marcus said. Even billionaires, Richard laughed. It sounded broken, especially billionaires. We're not allowed to be human. We're supposed to be these titans of industry, these unstoppable forces. Show weakness and the sharks smell blood, so you never show it. Never, until tonight. Until tonight, Richard agreed. He looked at Marcus. Why? Why did I tell you all this? Marcus thought about it. Because I have nothing to gain from you. I can't use your vulnerability against you. I can't tell the press or post it online or leverage it in a business deal. To me, you're just Richard. A guy who's hurting. Just Richard. Richard repeated quietly. I haven't been just Richard since I was 19 years old. They sat in silence for a while. The waitress refilled their coffee cups without comment. What did you do before? Richard asked. Before the streets. I was a social worker, Marcus said. Worked with homeless youth. Actually, ironic, right? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I was good at it, really good. I cared about those kids. What happened? My partner died. Car accident. We weren't married, so legally, I had no claim to anything. Our apartment, our savings, everything was in his name. His family hated me, hated that he was gay, hated me for corrupting him. Marcus stared at his coffee. They threw me out 3 days after the funeral. I had 2 47ers and the clothes on my back. Lost my job 2 months later because I couldn't hold it. Together, couldn't afford rent without his income. And here I am. That's not right, Richard said. No, Marcus agreed. It's not, but it's real. Richard pulled out his phone. Let me help you. No, Marcus said firmly. Richard looked shocked. No, I appreciate it, I really do. But if you're doing this because you feel guilty, or because helping me makes you feel better about your own problems, then no. I'm not a charity case for you to feel good about. Richard set down his phone slowly. You're right. You're absolutely right. He took a breath. What if I'm not offering because I feel guilty? What if I'm offering because in the last hour, you've shown me more genuine humanity than anyone has in the last 5 years? Then I'd say you need better people in your life. I do, Richard said. Starting with you. Marcus shook his head. I'm homeless. Richard, I sleep under an overpass. I smell bad. I haven't had a real conversation with another human being. In 4 months, I'm not exactly friend material. You let me cry on your shoulder in the diner, Richard said. You told me the truth when I needed to hear it. You're treating me like a person, not a bank account with legs. He leaned forward. Marcus, I'm not offering you a handout. I'm asking if you'd consider being my friend. Someone I can talk to without filtering every word through a PR strategy. Someone who'll tell me when I'm being an asshole. Someone real. Marcus studied his face. Are you serious? I've never been more serious in my life. And what happens? When the novelty wears off. When you remember that I'm just some homeless guy you met one night. When your friends start asking questions. Then I'll remember this moment, Richard said, when I was at my lowest, and a man with nothing shared his time with me because I needed someone to listen. When did you last feel truly seen, Marcus? When did someone last treat you like you mattered? Marcus felt his throat tighten. 4 months. On week 2 days ago. Then we're the same, Richard said. Both invisible, both alone. Both counting days. He held out his hand. Let's stop counting. Marcus looked at the hand. Thought about everything that could go wrong. Thought about pride and dignity and all the reasons to say no. Then he thought about Richard's face when he said he wanted to die, about the loneliness that money couldn't fix, about being seen. He shook Richard's hand. Richard paid the bill. They stepped back out into the cold night. I meant what I said about helping, Richard told him. Not because I feel guilty, because I want to. Because you deserve better than sleeping under an overpass. I know a shelter, Marcus said. It's okay. Screw the shelter. I own an apartment building 6 blocks from here. I have an empty unit on the 4th floor. 2 bedrooms fully furnished. The previous tenant moved out 3 weeks ago, and I haven't bothered listing it yet. Richard pulled out his phone again. I'm texting my building manager right now. His name is Carlos. He'll have keys for you in 20 minutes. Richard, I can't. You can, Richard interrupted, and you will. Not as charity, as a gift between friends. Because that's what friends do. Marcus felt tears burning his eyes. Why are you doing this? Because you saved my life tonight, Richard said simply. You didn't know it. But you did, and I want to do the same for you. 27 minutes later, Marcus stood in an apartment with hardwood floors and windows that overlooked the city. It was clean and warm and had a refrigerator that actually worked. There was a bed with real sheets, a bathroom with hot water, a kitchen with cabinets full of dishes. Richard had stayed long enough to make sure everything was in order, then left with a promise to call tomorrow. Get some sleep, he said. Real sleep in a real bed. You're safe now. Marcus stood in the middle of the living room and cried for the first time in 127 days. 3 months later, Marcus walked into the conference room at Ashford. Technology's wearing a suit that fit him properly. His hair was cut, his face was clean-shaven, and he had a leather portfolio under his arm. Richard had offered him a position as Director of Community Outreach. His job was to design and implement programs for homeless youth, using his experience and expertise to actually make a difference. But more than that, he and Richard had become actual friends. They had dinner every Tuesday night. No agenda, no business talk. Just 2 people talking about life. Richard told him about Emma, about the custody battle he was fighting, about his fear that he'd destroyed his relationship with his daughter beyond repair. Marcus told him about David, about the grief that still woke him up at night, about learning to build a life from nothing. Richard had started therapy, real therapy, with a psychologist who didn't care about his net worth. He'd cut back his schedule, delegated more, and started the hard work of figuring out who Richard James Ashford actually was underneath the CEO persona, and slowly, carefully, he was reaching out to Emma. Video calls every Sunday morning, which had turned into video calls twice a week. He'd missed her birthday for 3 years, but this year he'd flown to London and spent the entire weekend with her, just him and Emma. No assistants, no schedule. They'd gone to a playground and eaten ice cream and talked about her favorite books. She'd told him she missed him, and he'd cried and told her he missed her too. The board meeting started with the usual reports and projections. Marcus sat in the back, there to observe, to learn how these things worked. Halfway through, Jonathan Pierce, the CFO, cleared his throat. Richard, I have to bring up a concern that several board members have raised. Richard looked up from his notes. Go ahead. It's about Marcus. Jonathan gestured toward him. We're concerned about the optics of hiring someone with his background, someone who was homeless just months ago, now in a director-level position. It looks like favoritism. It undermines the integrity of our hiring practices. The room went silent. Marcus felt his face flush. He'd known this was coming, had been waiting for it. Honestly, the whispers, the skeptical looks, people wondering if he was qualified or just Richard's pet. Project, Richard set down his pen very carefully. I see. And who exactly has these concerns? Several of us, Jonathan said. We just want to make sure the company is being run professionally, not as a personal charity. Professional, Richard repeated. He stood up. Let me tell you about professional. Jonathan, you've been CFO for 8 years. In that time, your department has had a turnover rate of 76%. Want to know why? Because you treat people like numbers on a spreadsheet. You make them work 80-hour weeks and then act shocked. When they burn out, Jonathan's face went red. That's not fair. I'm not finished, Richard said coldly. Margaret, you're head of HR. You've implemented exactly 0 programs to support employee mental health despite my repeated requests. You told me it wasn't cost-effective. Thomas, your marketing campaigns have been tone-deaf and borderline, offensive 3 times in the last 2 years. And David, you've been embezzling from the company for 18 months. I have the proof. I've been waiting for the right moment to address it. David went white. Marcus, Richard turned to him, in 3 months, has done more for this company's reputation than all of you. Combined, his youth outreach program has been covered in 4 major newspapers. We've received 14,000 applications from qualified candidates who said they wanted to work for a company that actually cares about people. Our public approval rating has jumped 23 points. He walked around the table, stopping behind Marcus's chair. But more importantly, Marcus taught me something that none of you ever did. He taught me that being a good person is more valuable than being a successful businessman. That vulnerability isn't weakness. That sometimes the best decision you can make is to help someone simply because they need help. Richard put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. So if you have a problem with Marcus being here, then you have a problem with me. And I suggest you start updating your resumes, because I don't want people on my board who measure human value by bank account balance. Jonathan stood up abruptly. You can't talk to us like this. You're fired, Richard said, effective immediately. Security will escort you out. You can't fire me. The board, I own 68% of this company, Richard interrupted. I absolutely can fire you. Anyone else want to question Marcus's qualifications? No one spoke. Good, Richard said. Meeting adjourned. Marcus sat there stunned. As the room cleared, Richard dropped back into his chair beside him. Sorry, he said. I probably should have warned you that was coming. You didn't have to do that, Marcus said quietly. Yes, Richard said firmly. I did. You earned your position here. You work harder than anyone in this building. And I'm tired of people thinking that kindness is a weakness, he smiled. Besides, you were right. I needed better people in my life, so I'm getting rid of the bad ones. Marcus laughed despite himself. You just fired your CFO. I've wanted to fire Jonathan for 3 years. You just gave me the excuse. Richard leaned back. Marcus, that night in the diner, you saved my life. Not with grand gestures or inspirational speeches. You saved me by treating me like a human being, by letting me break down without judgment, by showing me that connection matters more than success. I was just being decent, Marcus said. Exactly, Richard replied. Just decent, that's all it takes. Being decent to each other. Seeing each other, helping when we can, not because we'll get something back, but because it's right. 6 months after that night outside the Plaza Hotel, Richard stood in his apartment holding a phone. His hands were shaking. Daddy? Emma's voice came through the speaker. Are you okay? He was crying, happy tears this time. Yeah, baby, I'm okay. I'm really okay. Mommy says I can spend the summer with you. The whole summer. I know, Richard said, I know. We're going to have so much fun. We'll go to the zoo and the museum, and anywhere you want. Can Marcus come too? Emma asked. I want to meet him. He sounds nice. Richard smiled. Yeah, Marcus can come too. After he hung up, Marcus appeared in the doorway of the guest room where he'd been staying. Richard had invited him to move in last month. Said the apartment was too big for one person anyway. They'd fallen into an easy routine. Breakfast together. Work, dinner, movies on weekends. The friendship that had started in a diner had become something deeper. Family, maybe. Brotherhood. You got her for the summer? Marcus asked. I got her for the summer, Richard confirmed, wiping his eyes. God, Marcus. I get my daughter for the whole summer. You're going to be great, Marcus said. You already are. Richard looked at him. I never thanked you properly. For that night, for saving me. You thank me every day, Marcus said. By being a good friend. By being the man you are now. Not the man you were. I was dead inside, Richard said quietly. I had everything and I was dead. You showed me how to live again. You saved me too, Marcus pointed out. I was dying on those streets. Maybe not as dramatically as you, but I was disappearing. You saw me when I was invisible. You gave me back my life, so we saved each other, Richard said. Yeah, Marcus agreed. We did. Richard walked over and hugged him. Not a polite handshake or a professional pat on the back. A real hug, the kind you give family. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for having dinner with me. Thank you for asking, Marcus whispered back. They stood there in Richard's multi-million-dollar apartment. Two men who'd been lost and found each other. A billionaire and a beggar who taught each other the only lesson that really mattered, that everyone deserves to be seen, that kindness costs nothing and means everything, that sometimes the richest thing you can give someone is your time, your attention, your humanity, that we're all just people trying to make it through the night, and it's so much easier when you don't have to do it alone. 2 years later, Richard stood at a podium in front of 800 people at a TED conference. He hated public speaking, but Marcus had convinced him this story needed to be told. 2 years ago, Richard began, I had 47 billion and wanted to die. Tonight, I have 41 billion. I've given a lot away, and I've never felt more alive. The difference wasn't money. The difference was a man named Marcus Chen, who taught me that being seen is worth more than being successful. That connection is more valuable than any acquisition. That sometimes the best investment you can make is in another human being. He paused, finding Marcus in the audience. Emma was sitting next to him, now 9 years old, holding his hand. She spent every summer with Richard now, and holidays too. They talked every single day. She knew his middle name. She knew he was afraid of thunderstorms. She knew he was trying to be better. I'm not here to tell you to give away your money or quit your job and find enlightenment, Richard continued. I'm here to tell you to see people. Really see them. The homeless man on your corner has a name. Your assistant has dreams. Your children need more than your money. They need your presence. And 2 years ago, a stranger saved my life by sharing a meal with me. He had nothing, and he gave me everything. He showed me that wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in moments, in connections, in the people who know your middle name and love you anyway. So here's my challenge to you tonight. Find your Marcus, be someone's Marcus. Stop counting your money and start counting your blessings. Stop building empires and start building relationships, because I promise you, when you're standing on that balcony at 2 a.m., wondering if it's all worth it, it's not your bank account that will pull you back. It's the people who see you, who really see you, and to Marcus, who's sitting right there with my daughter, who's become the brother I never had and the friend I didn't deserve. Thank you. Thank you for having dinner with me. Thank you for saving my life. Thank you for teaching me how to be human again. The audience stood and applauded, but Richard was only looking at one person. Marcus was crying. So was Emma, and Richard finally understood what being rich actually meant. It meant having people who would cry for you when you succeeded, who would catch you when you fell, who would sit with you in a diner at midnight and just listen. It meant being seen, and that was worth more than $47 billion could ever buy. If this story touched your heart, remember, everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know. Nothing about be kind, be present, see people, because sometimes the richest thing you can give someone is your attention, your time, your humanity. You never know whose life you might save just by asking their name and treating them like they matter, because they do. We all do. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that they're seen, that they matter. That connection is everything. And remember, it only takes one moment, one meal, one conversation to change everything. The end.